Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center, and welcome to Fusion 2019, a celebration of the mighty Mississippi. Before we begin, please help me thank again the Arkansas Symphony Youth Orchestra. Weren't they terrific? Well, we have a lot in store for you this evening. But before we begin our Fusion program, please help me thank our wonderful sponsors who have made this evening, the Institute tomorrow, and our wonderful temporary exhibit possible. First, I want to say a special word of thanks to the Quapaw tribe of Oklahoma, in particular, my wonderful friend, Chairman John Berry, who unfortunately has the flu. He wanted to be here with us tonight and is not able to join us, but we are just so grateful to the tribe and especially to the chairman for his incredible support of the Clinton Presidential Center and all of our educational programming over the last several years, and in particular, this program itself. I'm pleased Don Tilton could join us, and please give our regards to the chairman and tell him he's definitely missed this evening. I'd also like to thank Centennial Bank and the Little Rock Port Authority. Additionally, a special thanks to the staff, all the staff here at the Clinton Presidential Center. In particular, I'd like to give a shout out to Nate Thomas in the back of the room, who's the Educational Programs Manager for the Clinton Foundation. Wave, everybody. Wave, Nate, so everybody can recognize you. And Kathleen Pate with the National Archives. She does such a terrific job as well. The two of them together make a great team, so thank you. And thanks to all of the staff here and the staff that work in our food and beverage department. They do such a great job, and I'm always proud and pleased to recognize their efforts as well. We are very fortunate to have many, many partners. Programs like this, of course, are not possible to do alone. We have many partners who have contributed to the evening and who have lent objects, subject matter experts. So really want to thank them. There's so many to list, so I'm going to ask you to check the screen, and you can see their names, perhaps, maybe, up on a big screen, some maybe or maybe not. Anyway, here we go. Thanks to all the partners for making all of this possible, too. I'm thrilled that Fusion has been so well received by our community over the last 3 years. Fusion Arts and Humanities really enriches the teaching of our heritage, our culture, and human achievement by weaving the arts and humanities together to provide a unique interactive experience. In addition to tonight's program, the accompanying exhibition, The Mighty Mississippi, a Mosaic of American Growth, Fusion also includes a multi-day educator institute so that the teachers that are participating can take the knowledge that they learn here back to their schools and enrich their students' learning experience. I see several of our teachers here tonight. Wave to us, the teachers that are going to be participating. Oh, wow, there's quite a few of you here tonight. Well, thank you. A really special thanks to you for all you do each and every day to prepare our students for the future. Let's give a round of applause to all the teachers that are here this evening. Tonight's program will include performances by the students of the North Little Rock High School Theater Department, as well as 2018 Grammy nominee and Grammy winner David Evans. We are incredibly honored, David, that you chose to be with us tonight at the Clinton Center instead of at the Grammy Awards. So we're very grateful. Could you stand and let us recognize you as well? There we are. Sorry. Thank you. We'll also hear from two of the foremost experts on the Mississippi River, Dr. Tom Rankin, who joins us here from Duke University, and Dr. Rolando Hertz, director of the Delta Center for Culture and Learning in the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area. You'll also, all of you you will be able to participate in tonight's program. Throughout the evening, we will have time in between the performances and lectures so that you will be able to ask questions. So we hope you will take advantage of that opportunity and really be engaged in this evening. So without further ado, Tom, I'm going to ask you to come and begin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie, and another thanks to that great music. It was amazing. A lot of great stuff here in Little Rock, and it's wonderful to be at the Clinton Center. I can't think of a better venue for talking about the river, and a better place for talking about education and how we might weave more of the local and the historical and the environmental into the classroom. I titled this Long, Deep, and Wide, which you will hear probably, it'll come up later again in David's song. It comes directly from a blues song, Big Bill Broonzy. And this idea of the confluence of the Mississippi and how it extends both to life and also to the mythological, to lore. Big Bill Broonzy famously sings, Mississippi River, so long, deep, and wide, I can see my good girl standing on the other side. I cried and called, I could not make my baby hear. Lord, I'm going to get me a boat, woman, paddle on away from here. It's one of those songs that suggests the river as a barrier, but also as a romantic plain, as something to cross, as a promised land, but as an impediment, at least in that song. Not many things we say about the Mississippi River can ever really fully communicate the scale. And I just forgot I have this pointer. And if you could dim the lights a little bit, is this going to make my stuff go forward? Yes. The scale or the deep history of this place, and certainly nothing that I can say in 30 or 40 minutes or that we can cover in a couple of days can get quite there. It's nearly impossible to envision the river in its totality. Folks cross the river daily. We all see it, and we all choose to look the other way at times. It's an environmental and cultural ecosystem. It connects 2/3 of the continent in ways we both can stand here and talk about, but in ways we really don't fully understand. That's an image from way up north in Wisconsin, taken during the Farm Security Administration, and I'm going to show a number of historical images and a number of more recent images. In keeping with this idea of song and the way the river has been talked about, sung about, mythologized, Jimmy Rogers, maybe one of the great Mississippi songs, Miss the Mississippi and You. I'm growing tired, you all know this, we could all sing it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm growing tired of the big city lights, tired of the glamour and tired of the sights. In all my dreams, I'm roaming once more, back to the home on the old river shore. The river is this refuge. It's a place to go to get away. It's maybe a place to go and hide out. He goes on to say, roaming the wild world over, always alone in blue so blue. Nothing seems to cheer me under heaven's dome. Miss the Mississippi and You. Highly romantic song, but one that gets at some of the sort of abiding themes that keep coming up over and over and over again about this river. When Johnny Cash read or picked up an article and read in it that Johnny Cash has the Big River Blues in his voice, he decided maybe he should write a song like that, so he wrote Big River, a lovelorn country tune. In the song, at least, he can't find this woman, and I'll quote a few verses here. Now I taught the weeping willow how to cry, and I showed the clouds how to cover up a clear blue sky, and the tears that I cried for that woman are gone. Flood you, Big River, that I'm going to sit right here until I die. And he goes on and basically never finds her as he goes downriver. He met her accidentally in St. Paul, and it tore me every time I heard her drawl, southern drawl. Then I heard my dream way back downstream, cavorting in Davenport, and I followed you, Big River, when you called. That, again, the river's this backdrop for love, for tears, for mythology. This photograph, or not this image of of a Steamboat by Harlan Hubbard, a Kentucky painter, a writer, shanty boat man. And I'll contrast that picture with a painting he did of his shanty boat that he built to take from Kentucky all the way to New Orleans. A kind of statement of resistance, a modern-day Thoreau, somebody who wanted to see all of this expansive terrain and water, but he wanted to do it on his own terms. He didn't want to do it on the steamboat. He wanted to do it on the shanty boat with his wife that he built himself and remained living on the banks of a river until he died. But that river as a statement, as a refuge, but also as a border. What better example of that than Conway and Loretta singing Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, where they can't get together, they've got to cross the river can't keep us apart. Or in Memphis, Al Green, Take Me to the River, a more sacred, biblical, have to be biblical. Take me to the river and wash me down. Won't you cleanse my soul, put my feet on the ground. All of this music mixes and mixes to us, mixes in this room right now, but mixes as it comes down this river and these cities and towns along, back and forth, from St. Louis to Memphis, Helena, Greenville, New Orleans, Davenport. Bears witness to the fluidity, as we were talking earlier today, about form and influence, the fluidity of water, but more importantly, the fluidity of imagination and labor and exploitation. The river in all its mystery and all its natural unpredictability, and I would say also its violence, sometimes unannounced, sometimes natural, sometimes the result of the businesses and worlds that grow up around it, challenge these romantic notions. This is Andrew Jones in Tiptonville up on Reelfoot Lake. Grew up in that land forever changed by the New Madrid earthquake of 1811, and who sang about the river, who sang about labor, who sang about his own toils. To understand the vastness of this is difficult, but there's a starting place. I don't know how many of you have seen the kind of fundamental documentary, The River, Per Lorentz's film, 1938, that was part of the WPA, Federal Writers Project, New Deal effort. And it begins with an amazing intro, voiceover, trying to get at this thing of the massiveness of the river. Down the Yellowstone, I just love the poetry of this, so I'm going to read it. I'm going to make you hear all these rivers that dump in to the Mississippi. Down the Yellowstone, the Milk, the White, and Cheyenne, the Cannonball, the Musselshell, the James, and the Sioux. Down the Judith, the Grand, the Osage, and the Platte, the Skunk, the Salt, the Black, the Minnesota. Down the Rock, the Illinois, the Kankakee, the Allegheny, the Monongahela, Kanawha, Muskingum. Down the Miami, the Wabash, the Licking, and the Green, the Cumberland, the Kentucky, and the Tennessee. Down the Wichita, the Red, and the Yazoo. Down the Missouri, 3,000 miles from the Rockies. Down the Ohio, 1,000 miles from the Alleghenies. Down the Arkansas, 1,000 miles from, down the Arkansas, 1,500 miles from the Great Divide. Down the Red, 1,000 miles from Texas. Down the Great Valley, 2,500 miles from Minnesota, carrying every rivulet and brook, creek and rill, carrying all the rivers that run down 2/3 of the continent. The Mississippi runs to the Gulf. That's Per Lorentz's offering, and we heard earlier today, and not so far from that, but from a very different perspective and a much more global perspective, is Langston Hughes, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. 1921, as Lisa said today, written when he was 17, while crossing the Mississippi. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when the dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. What's so amazing about this poem in contrast to all these other voices is these are words that hearken to the middle passage, that hearken to labor in lands far away, but not so far away for African Americans in the South, in America. It connects all of us, but it also connects the river and labor and migration and exploitation and slavery and showboats and all of the good and the bad and the seen and the unseen, all in those very few lines written by, if you can believe it, a 17-year-old. How could that be? The river, this river, if you stand on it, if you get on it, if you get out in it, this is not far from Greenville, Mississippi, a sandbar. It's endless. It's as far, you can see as far as you can see, as they say. There's the headwaters of it. In 1939, Herbert Halpert, a folklorist from the Library of Congress, was traveling around Mississippi collecting folk songs, and he recorded a guy in Greenville, Mississippi, Joe Shores, who at that time was, I think, 52 years old, and he was a pilot on the night run of a ferry between Greenville and Arkansas City, Arkansas. And Shores sang for him a song. Well, it's not really a song, although it is a song. It's a call. It's the Mississippi Sounding Call. And it simply goes quarter less 4, quarter less twain, half twain, 9.5 feet, quarter twain, 9 feet, mark twain, 8.5 feet. It was his sounding call that he had learned on the front of boats with that rope in the dark, making sure the pilot knew the depth of the water. It's a song that comes out of work, not out of play. It's a song that enters into art through work, enters into what we understand to be part of that great legacy of the music of this corridor and the music of African American communities. But it comes through work, and I want to talk a little bit about the idea of labor and labor as it relates to this thing we call the river. There's the labor of folks who live between the levees. There's the subsistence labor, and there's the labor of working on towboats. And within that, there's a range of tasks and traditions and opportunities. There's the pilot. These are all from Louisiana, from Russell Lee's photographs in the 1930s. And there's a cook. There are stevedores that load and unload, and in that loading and unloading, songs come forward. Beautiful, beautiful work songs, and those get passed on, and they get sung, and some of them get sort of sung for folk song collectors long after the job is over, and then they sort of fade out at least from their utilitarian use. And you occasionally hear, well, wasn't that music beautiful? How beautiful was it? These are stevedores taking a nap on the front of a boat coming upriver. Tiny in the context of that river, tiny in the context of the task, tiny in the context of that big ship. If we don't understand that kind of contrast of this kind of labor with the owner of the boat, a recent Yugoslavian immigrant who had all kinds of opportunity, who took advantage of opportunity and had his own story. And these intersecting stories are what this river gives us, and it gives us a chance to really see them and see them in ways and contrast a picture like this with a picture like this. It's not a way to get to the final answer, but it's a way to get to the whole story, and the story of this thing, this big corridor, this beautiful body of water that we've tried to contain and sculpt and craft. Unloading boats day after day after day, making up songs to get through the day, making up songs to time the work, making up songs to stay sane. And those songs feed other songs, and that becomes part of our collective legacy. And we need to sort of see where some of that actually comes from. I'm reminded again, and the students that are here, this is a little bit of repetition, but back to Natasha Trethway and her writing in her scenes from a documentary history, Mississippi, where she talks about refugees trying to get up the levee and trying to find a place in the middle of the 27 flood or the 37 flood or some flood and get to the levee. We see the levee as lots of things. The levee is this protector. It's a fishing place, like in Greenville for this gentleman. Place to sit and fish. It's a place to launch boats. It's a place to see the sunset. It's a place to see the beauty. But if we had been there for the building of the levee, we wouldn't. It was a very trying, difficult task. If we listen to David Evans today talk about not allowing black families to leave during the flood, the levee becomes a very different place. What's between the levees, the life between the levees, another kind of labor. People that choose to be on the river, that choose to make, like John Ruskey, a boat like this, that choose to spend hours out there to really understand it from being there. I wish we were there now. I mean, I wish we were on that water having this conversation. Steve Kaplan, a commercial fisherman who could have taken many of jobs. He didn't have to work on the river, didn't have to catch catfish. It's his own resistance to working in fluorescent light every day, having a regular job. It's a way to be out in it and to be his own captain, and to be able to deal with what is good and bad of the injuries of time and weather. This is, we were told, this is the levee at Tiptonville in 1937. And this is a family near there, Dorothea Lang photographing a family in the middle of trying to find their way. A very innocuous looking picture until we know the story and know where it comes from and knows what might be up for them. Drainage is such a determinant. I often say drainage is destiny. Where we live in the drainage, whether we live close, whether we live up on the hill, whether we live at the fork of two rivers coming together, how water moves from our place to another place determines everything. It determines culture. It determines our safety. It determines how we fare in a flood. And frankly, drainage determines how we fare in a drought. And so we forget that so often. We look at these early pictures of Walker Evans pictures from Vicksburg. We see the relationship of town to water, close to water, very close to water. But I can bet you, and I know, and anybody who's been to Vicksburg knows, that up on those hills are the big houses. Down by the water are the businesses and the small houses. We know what drainage is, and we know that we can read a map of a town and understand where people live by looking at the drainage. That is part of the river. The other part of the river is what's in the river and what brings people to the river, and this sense that the river holds an abundance, that it's an Eden, that it's a place you can go and have an experience and bring something out of it. You can stand on the bank. I was going down the river over about 8 days and was almost out of gas. It's an embarrassing thing to say, but almost in a little John boat. I'm not as tough as John Rusky, so I wasn't paddling. We were in a John boat, and there's no marinas along the Mississippi River anymore. I mean, the Mississippi River now has been so channeled and got so many that it's like getting on a freeway with no exit, except at there's certain towns, but you got to be careful. Well, I hadn't been very careful, and so I realized we were almost out of gas. So I had this idea: we just pull over to the first guy we see and see how far town is. And so this was him, we pull up, a guy fishing quietly by himself, and I felt terrible because he didn't come out there to have a boat show up. And I apologize just as we get there, and he reels in a drum, basically a big drum fish, and he says, "No, you didn't do it. I think you scared this fish on my hook. Thank you." And he takes us to town, gets us a tank of gas. Interaction with one person in this massive, expansive landscape. Single people running tight lines, trot lines. Are they there to get away? Are they there to understand where they are? Are they there because of the birds that come up and down the river? Are they there because they're concerned with what's happening? They're there for all kinds of reasons. And they're there for the fish that are there. And there's this relationship that goes on. And it really is invisible. This kind of relationship is invisible at 60 miles an hour crossing the river bridge. There's no way. There's no way. It's invisible how many oxbows there are, and it's invisible what happens when the river jumps its banks. I mean, it's not invisible, sorry, when the river jumps its banks. The number of people who choose, and I do think it's a kind of deep choice, who choose at this point to use the river as a source of work and food, we can learn a lot from. They are the people that understand this place on a kind of tactile level, on an experiential level. They see it, they feel it, they are concerned about it, but they're going to go there anyway. I'm going to speed ahead to this. And we see along these rivers, in islands and banks, another kind of ongoing work and commerce, the timber companies and the clearing of land and the replanting of trees. And I'm reminded of Mary Hamilton in Trials of the Earth, who writes about her family's experience in the Mississippi Delta when they settled in the Delta. First in the Arkansas side in the late 19th century. And she's writing about an experience in 1896 where she says, and if you need to read Trials of the Earth if you haven't, it's a woman wrote this in the 40s of her family's life in logging camps in the Delta on both the Arkansas and Mississippi side. But she writes, "We drove down the Mississippi River levee about a mile, then turned off the levee down into the thickest timber I had ever seen. Oak, gum, ash, hackberry, and poplar stood so thick, with no underbrush, only big bone cane growing rank and tall, almost to the limbs of the trees. When we came out on the Mississippi River, the ground was sand, but it was black, and the woods were thinner. There were fewer trees, but larger, big old cottonwoods and sycamores that seemed to me when I looked up like their tops were lost in the sky." Mary Hamilton described having been there. She lived there most of her days, and it was there that they ran these logging camps, but had to move constantly as they moved up and down the river to clear land. We now see another kind of we've in some ways we've done such things to our rivers that we've started trying to raise fish on farms, and so we see a connection, and there is a connection. There's a really tight connection between some of those earlier pictures you saw of people catfishing on the Mississippi River and these catfish ponds in delta lands and flatlands in the Mississippi Delta, the Arkansas Delta, and to some extent in Tennessee, to try to take what was a river fish, what was always a sustenance fish, a kind of subsistence fish, and make it into something else. And these aren't rivers, but they look a little like rivers if you stand in a certain way. And yet they're manufactured. But there is this connection. There's this connection of the fish. There's a connection of the water, and there's a sacredness to that kind of enterprise. There's a sacredness to that fish. That's a real fish. That's caught jug fishing, which is another way to go at the river and take advantage of its flow. And how many people in here jug fish? You put out a bunch of jugs with hooks on them about this long and some bait and just let them float down river, and then when they go under, you go chase them down. It's like the most natural way you're fishing with the flow, and you end up with something like this if it goes well. This need to and I think this is where we all can really relate. The need to be on water, the need for the vista over the river, the need to be able to feel something about that, to be in a boat, whether it's a sailboat, a dugout canoe, a john boat, that need to have that connection is maybe why we're even talking about the Mississippi River here. I mean, why else would we talk about it? We're not, we understand the magic of it, the magnetism of it, and we also understand the danger of it, and we want to understand the history of it. We ritualize it over and over and over again, and we make it and have and will continue to see it as sacred. Baptisms, harder to do now in oxbows along the Mississippi River because of water quality and also because churches and populations have moved. But the outdoor baptism that sees the river not as a catfish hole at that moment, on that Sunday at least, and not as a place for a towboat, but as a kind of tabernacle, as a place for the most fundamental ritual of the Baptist Church, full immersion, and to use that water in that way, to see that water. Twain talks about water in all kinds of other ways, and Walt Whitman talks about water, but to see that water, that particular water that you're standing in, to not worry about how many thousands of miles of water, but to just see that as the tabernacle, as the place for, as the preacher would say, the watery grave, where you go in and come out. And I think it's that watery grave and that, figuring out that kind of redemption that we've got to think more carefully about. This is the reason to go out on the river with John Ruskey in one of his boats, is to be able to look at that, to stand there and look at that, and just to say, my gosh, I didn't realize this river was that big. I didn't realize it had this much sand. I wish this picture were a little bigger. This is the last one I want to show, but I want to tell a story about being out on the river with Steve Kaplan, a commercial fisherman. And it was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and the river was very low. It was in a drought. And when the river is very low, the sandbars are exposed in ways, obviously, that they aren't at other times. And when it gets very low, it's kind of interesting to just explore the sandbars, and you find all kinds of stuff. You find all kinds of trash, but you also find all kinds of old bones and mastodon teeth, and you name it. It's in that corridor of the natural world, but you find Clorox jugs and Budweiser cans right alongside it. Steve Kaplan is walking up on the sandbar, and he starts yelling to me to come, and he wants me to look at something, and it's this. This is 2 frames of a photograph, so this is like a panorama without the iPhone app. And he says, I want you to tell me, there's this whole story, the whole story of everything is right here. The commercial fisherman is telling me this. The story of everything is right here, and I want you to tell me the story. And so I didn't tell him the story because I wanted him to tell me the story. But he's reading this little landscape, and this is maybe about 10 feet by 4 feet on the sand. And he wants me to tell him what happened, and so I act like I don't know because I wanted to hear. And he says, what happened is, he says, you see that freshwater mussel up there in the left in the sand. He said that freshwater mussel was in this little pool of water and took this trip and went down. When it had water in it, went down to see this big rock. And he said, you know, we all want to see the big rock. He went down to see the big rock, and he came around, and he got to there, and the water ran out. And that's the story, he says. It's all right here. This is all you need to see. And I think there's a way in which the only way to understand something so big as the river is not only by looking at this kind of thing, but is to look very small. You know, we see big when we look small, and I think that we have to look at the particular, we have to look at the granular, not in such a way that we can't see the forest for the trees, but we have to be able to see something particular. It needs to relate to us. We need to have an understanding of it before we can understand that huge expanse or any of these figures or any of these numbers of miles of river. And I'll close just with this idea from Eudore Welty about the journey. And it is a journey of discovery, not unlike this freshwater mussel, who happens to be just not coincidentally, but the freshwater mussel is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to freshwater pollution. When the mussels start to die, you know it's far too late. That's not what happened here, but it has great symbolism sitting there in the sand, upright, having expired. But Welty says it's our journey that leads us through time, forward or back, seldom in a straight line, most often spiraling. Each of us is moving, changing with respect to others. You could change a few words in there and say Mark Twain wrote that about the Mississippi River, that the river leads through time, forward and back, seldom. You see where I'm going. I think to understand something so vast as that river, it's the journey of discovering the convergences and the confluences of our own experience and of the experience of people that are close to the river and getting a little closer, whatever that means for us. Everybody doesn't become a catfish of trotline fisherman. Everybody doesn't ramble on sandbars, but finding a way to get a little closer, to get a closer understanding of this vast thing. It's the only way we're going to understand both the dark and the light of the experience along here, and it's the only way we're really going to save ourselves and save that kind of great resource from just, if not negligence, if not violence, a kind of collective negligence. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rank. Testing, 1, 2, 3. All right, we've got time for 2 questions. You want to get the mic to you, so raise your hand if you have a question. And we've got 1 and 2 mics to help assist with that. I see one right here. Yeah.
Professor Rankins, yes. I've also have learned that river has always been called the mighty Mississippi, but I've learned too that it has also been called the mighty muddy Mississippi. Right. And so my question is, I know that you mentioned the sand factor. Mm-hmm. Does the drainage and the sand factor, could it possibly be 2 factors, and perhaps maybe there are some other factors why it is such a muddy river?
Well, yeah, there's an environmental historian that says it's basically dirt and water, and that creates mud. I think there's so much sediment that runs. There's naturally a lot of sediment runs into any river, but with dredging, with agriculture, with what we do along it, the amount of sediment and dirt that runs into the river now is so much larger than it would have been prior to all of the ways we've channeled it and what we've done along it. When we clear cut all the trees right up at the edge, where's the dirt going to go? It's going to go. I mean, there's so many different reasons, but I will also say that it's a very kind of virgin river. After a huge rain becomes muddy, but then it clears. It becomes muddy and it clears. I mean, it's a kind of a natural process. This river, the amount of sediment, and when Père Lorenz in 1938 made that film for the New Deal, they were trying to convince people to change farming practices because it was already building up too much sediment down at the mouth of the river. So there's just a lot going into it that, and the muddy Mississippi has also become kind of a almost romantic thing too, in some strange way. I mean, it doesn't sound good to, it doesn't sound nice, but we've I don't know when that term started, but we've certainly glommed onto it, and we use it so often. The mighty Mississippi, I mean, the Mississippi doesn't really flow much anymore because we don't get, but compared to what it would have done before it was channeled and channelized, and when it was really left to just flow, it would have been running at a dangerous pace. It's still a dangerous place to be, but it's not as fast as it was. Yes.
I know my wife just took some of the time. One thing I wanted, two things. One is you did touch on is the importance of the river in agriculture. Mm-hmm. Now, most of us don't know that the Mississippi floods some 50 miles each way, which with all the slit and all the stuff that makes up fertilizer land.
The rich soil.
Yeah, it's played a major role in that. And since it's Black History, I wanted to bring up another point, and I've been looking for an audience that I could speak about it. A few days ago, papers carried one of our public servants and man high up in government went on to say more or less that what we've accomplished, the accomplishments, basically have been done by white people. No one has answered that, and and a lot of it has, but they gave no reasons why. And I would point to a book, Mainstreams of Civilization, an exhaustive study on climate and the part that all this plays. It tells why this has happened, because it has to have the right climate for inventions, etc. Too far north is too cold to do anything. Too far south is too hot to do anything. So in that band that runs, it is the best climate for the production and for invention and so forth. Late in the south, we sleep. We take our naps because it's actually too hot to do anything. And to the north, the Eskimos, it's just absolutely too cold to do anything. So it's not a matter of race that makes a difference, but it's a matter of climate that makes a difference. And we do know that necessity is the mother of invention, but without the proper setting, we aren't going to accomplish anything.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our Q&A section. Back to you, Dr. Rankin, for our next section.
Yeah. So it's really there's nothing that gives me more pleasure, and I think most of you would agree, than to be able to introduce high school students who are responding to the mighty Mississippi with literary excerpts. And so I'm going to introduce all three of them at once. Josie Zakruski, Dawson Teague, and Taylor Stewart, who are going to come up. They're all from North Little Rock High School Theater Department, and they're going to enliven us and enlighten us. Make them welcome.
Mississippi at Midnight by Walt Whitman and performed by Josie Zakruski. How solemn. It's okay. Okay, I'm going to begin again. This is The Mississippi at Midnight by Walt Whitman and performed by Josie Zakruski. How solemn, sweeping this dense black tide. No friendly lights in the heavens over us, a murky darkness on either side and kindred darkness all before us. Now drawn nearer the shelving rim, weird like shadows suddenly rise, shapes of mist and phantoms dim, baffle the gazer's straining eyes. River fiends with malignant faces, wild and wide their arms are thrown, as if to clutch in their fatal embraces him who sails their realms upon. Then by the trick of our swift motion, straight tall giants in army vast, rank by rank like the waves of ocean on the shore, march stiffly past. How solemn the river, a trailing pall, which takes but never again gives back, and moonless and starless the heaven's arched wall, responding in equal black. O tireless waters, like life's quick dream, onward and onward ever hurrying, like death in this midnight hour you seem, life in your chill drops, greedily burying. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dawson Teague, and as you can see, I'll be performing River in the Rain from Big River the Musical. And a little context for the piece. In the musical, when this song takes place, Huck Finn and Jim, a runaway slave, are escaping their hometown and going to somewhere, anywhere that wasn't where they were from, escaping all the troubles and the hardships that they were facing. So, like I said, this is River in the Rain from Big River the Musical. River in the rain. Sometimes at night you look like a long white train, winding your way away somewhere. River, I love you, don't you care if you're on the run? And you're winding someplace just trying to find the sun. Whether the sunshine, whether the rain. River, I love you just the same. But sometimes in a time of trouble, when you're out of hand and your
money bubbles roll across my floor. Can't weigh the things I treasure. Hell, there ain't no way to measure why I love you more than I did the day before. River in the rain. Sometimes at night you look like a long white train, winding your way away somewhere. River, I love you, don't you care? But sometimes in a time of trouble, when you're out of hand and your money bubbles roll across my floor, can't weigh the things I treasure. Hell, there ain't no way to measure why I love you more than I did the day before. River in the rain. Sometimes at night you look like a long white train, winding your way away from me. River I've never seen the sea. River in the rain. Now, when I had mastered the language of this water and had come to know every trifling feature that bordered the great river as familiarly as I knew the letters of the alphabet, I had made a valuable acquisition. But I had lost something too. I had lost something which could never be restored to me while I lived. Try and think back to a time when you were a child and witnessed something incredible, something beyond belief. For me, this spectacular something was Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena, California. I had the opportunity to go to the 2018 Rose Bowl game between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Georgia Bulldogs. The game went into double overtime, and it was one of the most exhilarating experiences of my entire life. What was almost equally amazing, however, was pulling up to the stadium at 6 a.m. and seeing the sun rise above the San Gabriel Mountains. This beautiful scene will forever be ingrained in my mind, but it makes me pause to wonder, do those who live there and see that scene every day feel the same awe that I felt, or does the scene just become another routine sight? Author Mark Twain describes this same phenomenon in his experience with the Mississippi River in two ways of seeing a river. But all the grace, the beauty, the poetry had gone out of the majestic river. I still keep in mind a certain wonderful sunset which I witnessed when steamboating was still new to me. A broad expanse of the river turned to blood. In the middle distance, the red hue brightened into gold, through which a solitary log came floating through, all black and conspicuous. In one place, a long slanting mark lay upon the water, and it was broken by the boiling, tumbling rings that were as many tinted as an opal. Where the ruddy flush was its faintest was a smooth spot that was covered with graceful circles and radiating lines, ever so delicately traced. The shore on our left was densely wooded, and the shadow that fell from this forest was broken in one place by a long, ruffled trail that shone like silver. And high above the forest was a clean-stemmed dead tree, waved a single leafy branch that glowed like a flame in the unobstructed splendor. flowing from the sun. There were graceful curves, reflected images, woody heights, soft distances. And over the whole scene, far and near, the dissolving lights drifted steadily, enriching it, every passing moment with new marvels of coloring. I stood like one bewitched. I drank it in a speechless rapture. The world was new to me, and I had never seen anything like it at home. But as I said, a day came when I began to cease from noting the glories and the charms which the moon and the sun and the twilight wrought upon the river's face. Another day came when I ceased to note them altogether. Then, if that sunset scene had been repeated, I would have looked upon it without rapture and commented upon it inwardly in this fashion. Sun means we're going to have wind tomorrow. A floating log means the river is rising, small thanks to it. The slanting mark on the water refers to a bluff reef, which is going to kill somebody's steamboat one of these nights if it keeps on stretching out like that. Those tumbling boils show a dissolving bar and a changing channel there. The lines and circles in the slick water over yonder are a warning that troublesome place is shoaling up dangerously. That silver streak in the shadow of the forest is the break from a new snag, and he's located himself in the very best place he could have found to fish for steamboats. That tall, dead tree with the single living branch, it's not going to last long. And then how's anybody ever going to get through this blind place at night without the friendly old landmark? No, the romance and the beauty were all gone from the river. All the value any feature of it had for me now was the amount of usefulness it could furnish toward accompanying a safe piloting of a steamboat. Since those days, I've pitied doctors from my heart. What does the lovely flush in a beauty's cheek mean to a doctor but a break that ripples above some deadly disease? Are not all her visible charms sewn thick with what are to him the signs and symbols of hidden decay? Doesn't he ever see her beauty at all, or does he simply view her professionally and comment upon her unwholesome condition all to himself? And doesn't he sometimes wonder whether he has gained most or lost most by learning this trade? As for me and my scenario, I'm pretty confident of the answer.
The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo when it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and put my pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden into the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers, and my soul has grown deep like those rivers. Thank you.
Just a kiss, just a smile, hold my hand, baby, once in a while. When that's all I need, that's all I need, I'll be satisfied. Oh, think of me when you're away. Call me darling just for today. And that's all I need, that's all I need, I'll be satisfied. Oh, true love came to me when I met you. True love makes me know I might not forget you when you're around me.
Okay, let's give another round of applause for these good folks over here. I want to introduce David Evans. I'm going to leave off all his degrees and things and just do a more personal. When I went to graduate school and well, actually when I was an undergrad with studying with Jeff Todd Titan, another blues scholar, he made us read David Evans. That was in the late 70s, and we had to read David Evans' book, published in 1971, before he even finished his PhD on. He published a book on Tommy Johnston, the great blues musician, and then I think Big Road Blues came out in 1982, which kind of reshaped blues scholarship and pulled together so much of his field work and research and writing into one major book. There's too much. He made a film on the Arthur Turner and the Fife tradition in Mississippi, and recorded songs from Panola County that are on a Library of Congress album that many of us kind of, they were part of our soundtrack years ago. Most recently, like about 5 minutes ago, no, about 3 hours ago, he won his second Grammy for for the liner notes to the historical liner notes to an album of Bill Ferris's field recordings. There's nobody that knows more about this music, and in recent years, nobody who's performed more. It's rare you find a scholar that can do both, but here's one. So bring him on. Not to mention he's got a kazoo in his hand.
I'm not going to use it tonight. Tomorrow. Do this systematically so I don't mess up. I think I can do that. Let me see. I got it. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Got to adjust it right, though. Do this. Okay. Well, thank you, Tom, for that introduction. And actually, Tom contributed a good bit to the album notes that won the Grammy, and it was recordings of Bill Ferris. He was supposed to be here, but then he got the Grammy nomination and had to make a tough decision as whether to come here or go to the Grammys, and probably a good thing he did go, because he won also for his own field recordings. But in the notes category, Tom and a fellow named Scott Beretta also contributed to the notes, and I want to recognize them and thank Tom especially for being the first to tell me that I won. They only allow one person to be represented out of the writers of the notes, which is kind of unfair to the others, but that's the way the Grammys do it. So whatever, I'm I'll take it. But I do want to recognize Tom and also Scott Beretta that contributed to that product, and of course Bill Ferris for making the recordings that I annotated. I have been studying blues both as an academic and researcher, and kind of in the course of that, I, of course, in recording and interviewing traditional blues musicians, I'd get to watch them play while I was making tape recordings. So I learned what I learned, at least this is my interpretation of blues, mostly by artists that I got to know in person, occasionally by studying their recordings and writing about them because they were deceased before I began my research on them. But one of the great, this is a program of Delta Blues. Tomorrow I'll be playing Mississippi River Blues. It's pretty much the same thing, but I'm going to do different songs each day. And I'm going to start with one by Charlie Patton. He was from Mississippi, spent all of his adult life in the Delta of Mississippi, often got over to Arkansas, even composed one of his blues about a flood in Arkansas back in 1930 in Mississippi County. Big lake overflowed, and so he knew both sides of the river. By the time blues came along, though, the river wasn't quite as important as an artery of commerce. The riverboats had just about faded out and given way to the railroads, and then the highways came in. So the river was a little bit more of a barrier, I guess, from the point of view of blues singers, especially because most of the blues are about men and women. But they comment, they give an insight into the society of those days and that way of life. And so, anyway, the Delta blues on both sides of the river, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, even West Tennessee, they get a little bit of a Delta too. It has a quality of intensity to it, both the strong rhythms, kind of dance-oriented rhythms, and also combined with a kind of minimalism, harmonic minimalism. Every note, every word is counts, is meant to be heard. Of course, a lot of people are doing other things while the music's being played, dancing, talking, as well as listening to the music. So the words of the blues, keep this in mind, they don't tell a story from beginning to end. They tell little scenes, and they might not seem connected. In fact, often they contrast with each other. Some people say the blues are inconsistent, but in fact, the human mind is often made up of contrasts too. You can have two things on your mind, different things at one time. So blues kind of reflects that. It has continuities and connections, and it has contrasts to it. It's really a reflection of the human mind. So this is the pony blues. Hitch up my pony and saddle up my black mare. I'm going to find my woman out in the world somewhere. Hitch up my pony, saddle up my black mare. Hitch up my pony, saddle up my black mare. I'm gonna find my rider, baby, in the world somewhere. I got a brand new Shetland, he's already trained. Got a brand new Shetland, baby, already trained. Just get in the saddle and tighten up on your reins. I got something to tell you when I get a chance. Something to tell you when I get a chance. I don't want to marry, baby, I just want to be your man. Well, I took my baby, meet the morning train. I took my baby to meet the morning train. And the blues come down, baby, like the showers of rain. All right, thank you. I got to turn up the guitar a little bit. I think it was a little bit too low there. Getting loud there. Okay, right, get my volume up here. Okay, well, the blues, Mississippi really, and Arkansas continue to contribute great singers to the blues tradition, at least up through the 1950s, and some of them lived on into the 1980s. One of the great transitional figures in the Delta blues was a man named Robert Johnson, and he again mentioned towns in the Delta in his blues, Greenville and Helena on the Arkansas side, and he unfortunately died a kind of tragic death in 1938 before he could become really famous. He was scheduled to play at Carnegie Hall, if you can believe it, in that year. And when they went to sign the contract with him to perform, they found out he had died, poisoned to death by a jealous man at a juke house where he was playing in Mississippi. So this is one of his famous songs, though, the Kind-Hearted Woman Blues. I got a kind-hearted woman, do anything in this world for me. I got a kind-hearted woman, do anything in this world for me. But these evil-hearted women, man, they will not let me be. But she says she don't see why I treat her so low down. But she says she don't see why, ooh, I always dog around. Now there must be that old evil spirit so deep down in the ground. But my home ain't here, it's way out in the west. But my home ain't here, ooh, it's way out in the west. Out in the Rocky Mountain, where the eagle builds his nest. Well, there ain't but one thing, baby, I swear that makes me drink. Lord, that's how you treat me, babe. And I begin to think, oh, babe, my life can't be the same. Will you break my heart? Will you call your other man's name? Call it now. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. I don't know why I can't get this volume louder. It was plenty loud earlier on, but yeah. Oh, Lord. Somebody plugged it in the wrong hole there. Well, okay. Now we're going to get the sound right. Yeah, well. Okay, there. All right, now we got it balanced. Well, the Delta had an extra need for workers in the fall and at the harvest season, and a lot of blues artists came in the fall. Some of them to pick cotton during the day and play music at night. Some of them just to play music at night, because the workers that were coming in from the hills surrounding the Delta were being paid by the day. They were making wages, and so there was money to be made for a blues singer. And one of the famous Mississippi singers, well, he got over in Arkansas too sometimes, was Tommy Johnson. He's from Crystal Springs, Mississippi, down below Jackson and back in the hills, and the farms were kind of eroded there. They'd pick the cotton early and then come on up in the Delta and get paid for working on the plantations. It wasn't very much, and it was very hard work, but there was cash flowing at that time, so that attracted musicians. And he learned from a lot of other Delta musicians like Charlie Patton that I played an example of earlier, and he brought that music back to his hometown and spread it among his brothers and cousins and neighbors and friends and other musicians in that area of Mississippi and other places where he traveled down into Louisiana, around Bogalusa was one of his haunts too. So this is one of his famous songs. This is the Big Road Blues, and I did a study of this song, did a book called Big Road Blues, and you can compare it to the blues of some of the other players up in the Delta. It was all part of a tradition at that time. The musicians learned from one another. So I got what I could of this song from a number of people that learned it from Tommy Johnson. So. Crying, I ain't going down no big road by myself. Now don't you hear me talking, pretty mama? Crying, I ain't going down no big road by myself. If I don't carry you, gone, carry somebody else. Crying my baby got ways like a fox squirrel in some tree. Now don't you hear me talking, pretty mama, crying my baby got ways like a fox squirrel in some tree. When she see me coming, run and hide from me. Crying you ain't gonna do me like you done Portia. Now don't you hear me talking, pretty mama, crying you ain't gonna do me like you done Portia. Take the poor boy's money, sure Lord won't take mine. Crying, how come you do me like you do, like you do. Don't you hear me now? How come you do me like you do? Well, the way you do me break my poor heart in two. Play it now. Crying today has been a long, old, lonesome day. Now don't you hear me talking, pretty mama, crying today has been a long, old, lonesome day. And I believe tomorrow gonna be the same old way. Crying now, what you gonna do when your trouble get like mine? Now don't you hear me talking, pretty mama, crying, what you gonna do when your trouble get like mine? Get your pick and shovel, ease on down the line. Crying, the sun gonna shine in my back door someday. Now don't you hear me talking, pretty mama, crying, the sun gonna shine in my back door someday. And the wind gonna change, gonna blow my blues away. Hey, all right. Thank you. Well, I got to have time for just one more. We had to change a tuning of a string on that. I'm going to change two more, lower them down into what the old-time blues musicians used to call Spanish tuning. It's not really Spanish, but it was named after a piece that was played in the tuning called the Spanish Fandango or the Spanish Flangdang, they used to call it. I tried to play that. I was over in Spain playing it, and I messed up, and the Spanish flung dung. So I don't play that Spanish Flangdang, but I play in Spanish. One of the great blues singers from the Delta was Son House. He was the mentor of both Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson, two of the other great Delta blues musicians who became better known, but Son House outlived both of them. And I got to know Son House, and it was my interpretation of a piece that he originated and recorded. Robert Johnson recorded his version of it. Muddy Waters did too. So this is a little of all of them. My interpretation is called the Walking Blues. I got up this morning feeling round for my shoes. Till by that I had these old walking blues. I got up this morning feeling round for my shoes. Well, you tell by that I had this old walking blues. Well, soon this morning feeling well, sometimes I feel like blowing my old lonesome horn. Got up this morning, all I had was gone. Well, I feel like blow my lonesome horn. Well, I got up this morning, all I had was gone. Well, if I feel tomorrow just like I feel today, I'm gonna pack my suitcase and make my getaway. Feeling tomorrow like I feel today. I'm gonna pack my suitcase, make my getaway. Well, I'm leaving in the morning if I have to go ride the blind. I've been mistreated, babe, and I don't mind dying. Leave in the morning, have to ride the blind. Well, I've been mistreated, babe, and I don't mind dying. Well, Lord, have mercy on my poor wicked soul. I wouldn't mistreat you, baby, for my weight in gold. Lord, have mercy on my wicked soul. Well, I wouldn't mistreat you for my weight in gold. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'll play a different bunch of songs tomorrow.
All right, thank you so much, Dave, for bringing some piece of the Grammys here to Little Rock, Arkansas. We're going to be setting the stage for our last speech of the afternoon, and I wanted to give a little bit of background on him as we get the stage set. Our last speaker is not only the director of the Delta Center, he serves on the Alliance of National Heritage Areas, the Mississippi Blues Commission, and the Mississippi Historical Society Board of Directors. Additionally, he's received a gubernatorial appointment to the Mississippi Commission for Volunteers. So Dr. Rolando Hertz, please welcome him to the stage. This will be we can. And before we start, we're going to cue up the video that we have for this last presentation.
It's all about what grows here.
The people that have come before.
the recipes and gatherings,
the prayers, the words, the land.
A spirit of creativity.
How you can smell the dirt.
And feel the music.
Rolling down 61.
This is our home.
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 The Mississippi Delta.
The Mississippi Delta.
Mississippi Delta. Stop by whenever you like.
The mighty river runs through us all. It binds us north, south, big and small. The river has made us who we are. Without it, the Delta would not be. The river brought us here to heal this land, hand in hand, you and me. Let us go to the river, walk together to the river. Let us go to the river, the mighty river of life. Again, I'm Rolando Hertz. I'm the director of the Delta Center for Culture and Learning at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi, the heart of the Mississippi Delta region, and the executive director of the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area. As you just saw in the video, we have a partnership with the National Park Service, and our collective mission is to promote greater understanding of the Mississippi Delta's culture and history and its significance to the world through education partnerships and community engagement. Our highly integrated program portfolio includes stimulating the Delta's creative economy, which I have been invited to share brief remarks about tonight, and which has been on full illustrious display for the entire lower Mississippi River Delta during this excellent Fusion Conference through music, lectures, poetry recitations, and river cultural heritage interpretation. For the past 9 years, the Delta Center has administered the Most Southern Place on Earth workshop, which invokes the title of the incomparable Mississippi Delta historical narrative by Southern Studies scholar Jim Cobb. The workshop is supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities and exposes K-12 educators from throughout the United States to the music, history, and culture of the Mississippi Delta, much like our Fusion program is doing this evening. And I just happened to meet one of our alums from our very first class, there you are, who's part of the program staff. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you. Go to the next slide. So these images are from our first day of the workshop. As my opening poem stated, without the Mississippi River, the Delta would not be. So the workshop begins with the river at the flood of 1927 site where the levee broke. This historic event that changed the course of American history was interpreted brilliantly earlier this afternoon by my colleague, Dr. David Evans, who presents at our workshops annually, who you just heard from. When I say that our program portfolio is highly integrated, I really mean it. This strategy is based on the principle of economic clustering. The more intersections that we can weave among seemingly disparate knowledge and activity strands in our organizations, institutions, and communities, the stronger the collective fabric of our organizational, institutional, and community fabric will become. For example, the Most Southern Workshop has created a network of over 600 alumni scholars nationwide who serve as educational and cultural ambassadors for the Mississippi Delta Natural Heritage Area. These educators take what they have learned back to their schools and communities across the country, sharing Mississippi Delta stories about the river, civil rights movement, and the blues. Many of them travel back to the Delta, bringing students, colleagues, family, and friends with them, which ultimately stimulates our creative economy. The Mississippi Delta Natural Heritage Area recently conducted an economic impact study focusing on organizations and programs like the Most Southern Workshop, which have proliferated across our 18-county region. The study factored in the region's tourism development partnership network, as well as local investments in cultural heritage development like our small grants program. The results of the study are quite promising. Our Delta Heritage area, as this graph shows you, is one of 49 across the United States, had an overall economic impact of $677 million in 2017, the third largest of all national heritage areas from which Tripp Umbach, our consultants, conducted an economic impact study. So we rank in the top 5. The total employment impact of the Delta Heritage Area and its partners on the Delta region was over 10,000 jobs. State and local government revenues attributable to the presence of the Delta Heritage Area totaled $52 million. And our tourism generated 5.1 million visitors, taking in sites and attractions throughout the 18-county Delta Heritage Area. So what could all of this mean for our broader lower Mississippi River Delta region? Indeed, the prospects for positive growth in our creative economic sector are promising as well. Tulane University in New Orleans also has an NEH teacher workshop focused on the music heritage of that renowned tourist city. The teachers are exposed to iconic musical heritage landmarks, including the New Orleans Jazz Museum, Preservation Hall, and Congo Square. Here, their workshop participants are pictured with the famous sculpture of jazz legend Louis Armstrong, located in Louis Armstrong's Jazz Park. There are 2 other national heritage areas located along the banks of the Mississippi River. Atchafalaya National Heritage Area celebrates the rich gumbo mix of European, African, Caribbean, and Native American cultures that has shaped the history and heritage of South Louisiana and our nation for centuries. Music, foodways, and religion express these diverse cultural influences. Atchafalaya is a Choctaw Native American word that means long river. So the heritage area also has a major focus on illustrating and interpreting river systems and aquatic ecosystems. Tennessee Civil War National Heritage Area focuses on the history and culture surrounding Civil War sites in that state. This heritage area counts the Slave Haven Underground Railroad Museum in Memphis among its Reconstruction-era assets located in the Mississippi River Corridor. Another asset right outside of Memphis, in aerial view below, is President's Island, where a freedom camp was established for enslaved African Americans in 1865. Today, the island is home to a diverse wildlife habitat and an industrial park that supports about 200 companies with 4,000 employees, with an estimated annual economic impact of $7.1 billion with a B. The gumbo mix metaphor is apt for our lower Mississippi River Delta communities. We offer a diverse and distinctive set of cultural ingredients, and when we put them together, we are cooking with gas and taste absolutely delicious. The strong woven fabric metaphor is quite appropriate too. When we stand back and look at the broader picture, just the few cultural assets that I've mentioned, when fused together into a collective, tell a story of a region bursting with arts and humanities activities that have economic impact and educational power waiting to be measured. And we cannot forget the importance of leadership. The Delta Regional Authority, which covers the lower Mississippi River Delta footprint, has housed for years its Delta Leadership Institute, of which I'm a graduate, building the collaborative networking capacity of Delta leaders across state and river lines to address chronic generational poverty throughout the region, as you can see the various distressed counties in our region. The Leadership Institute held its annual conference right here in Little Rock this past week. What better way to wrap up a week of leadership capacity building for our communities than with this event here tonight, Fusion Arts and Humanities Arkansas 2019. So many thanks and kudos to tonight's creatives and knowledge bearers, the Arkansas Symphony Youth Orchestra, Tom Rankin, our youth poetry interpreters from North Little Rock High School, Dr. David Evans, and others. And thanks to our leadership, Kaki Hockersmith and her team, and to the Clinton Foundation. We are inspired with a vision that the economic future of the lower Mississippi River Delta is even brighter with the fusion of our collective arts and humanities assets with the regional creative economy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hertz. I don't think I have fully appreciated the significant impact that the Mississippi River has had and continues to have on our economy. So thank you so much for your remarks, and thank you for your leadership as well. Yes, thank you. All right, for Fusion 2020, we are looking forward to continuing the Mighty Mississippi theme as we present the heart and soul of the Mississippi Delta. I'm looking forward to it and hope you will all, of course, make plans to join us again next year. I'd now like to recognize a very special person, really the driving force behind Fusion, its creation, and its evolution to what it is today. I'd like to ask Kaki Hockersmith to stand and let us recognize her, please, for all her incredible efforts. Kaki has been my friend for over 28 years, and she just continues to astound me with her brilliance, her creativity, and her passion. Again, thank you so much, Kaki. Now, I'd like to finally give all of our performers, our speakers, everyone here tonight that played a role in this magnificent program another round of applause. Please join me. I encourage all of you all to take a journey down the Mississippi River through the Fusion exhibit, which is located on the second floor atrium and the third floor across from the Oval Office. And after we conclude, I'd like you to join me for a reception right out here outside the Great Hall. But finally, please help me welcome vocalist Ronald Jensen McDaniel, who teaches voice for the Community School of Music at UCA, and his fantastic accompanist, James Standy, who will close out our program this evening.
There's an old man called in Mississippi. That's the old man that I like to be. What does he care if the world got trouble? What does he care if the land ain't free? Old Man River, that old man River. river. He must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and them that plants them is soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, with sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain, tote that barge, lift that bale, get a little drunk and you land in jail. I get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. Colored folk work on the Mississippi. Colored folk work what the white boss pay. Pulling them boats from the dawn till the sunset, getting no rest till the judgment day. Don't look up and don't look down. You don't dast to make the white boss frown. Bend your knees and bow your head and pull that rope until you're dead. Let me go away from the Mississippi. Let me go away from the white man boss. Show me that stream called the River Jordan. That's the old stream that I longs to cross. Oh, man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and them that plants them is soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, with sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain, tote that barge, lift that bale, get a little drunk, and you land in jail. I get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along.